Magic Silver 2 in 3D. Magic Silver 2. This is a movie about Santa's elves, although some places refer to them as gnomes. Quite possibly the blue people are elves and the red ones are gnomes, but I'm not entirely certain about that. Although Christmas songs are sung and their duty to the season is referenced, the story itself isn't directly about the holiday, but it's close enough to make for a magical Christmas Eve review. A few technical details to begin. My copy, the German edition, has no English. There is an edition that does include some English subtitles, which is long out of print and may be difficult to find. However, subtitles can be found online and downloaded, but making use of external subtitles is device-dependent and a bit of a learning curve. You might need to seek out a tutorial on that. Now, this is a natively shot 3D movie. Visually, it's a good-looking picture with what I might label as low to medium stereo. It has fun moments like a classic roller coaster shot, similar to what was found in the Polar Express, albeit a little less elaborate. And similar to Polar Express, they used some flat backgrounds in that scene, which might be justified if there was lots of camera movement, but here I never quite felt it got busy enough to justify not staying in stereo, although they do give us a moment from the cart's point of view, showing us the track in 3D, and it's a nice ride. There is some nice falling snow in other places of the movie. It looks like practical snow, though nowadays you never really know for sure. CGI is so good at slipping that in. There are other moments of debris and dust flying around rooms, like a little tornado, for which my only complaint is how brief those moments are. My favorite scene was this apparition that floated out of their kettle. Despite the unsophisticated special effects, the translucent appearance made it a fun moment of some elven magic, and perhaps the only time the 3D really pushed out of the screen. Our elves' blue and red uniforms help them contrast against the white snow. The constant white and gray of the snowy mountain settings did have a tendency to work against the stereo. Despite a few nice scenic shots of the landscape, it was often difficult to appreciate the depth in them unless you had, well, lots of colorful elves out there. Inside the caves, there were some shots that were a bit neat, sometimes seeing their little community in the background, but aside from a few moments, I rarely got the closed-in cave feeling. These caverns came across as a bit, shall we say, stagey, like I was watching a play rather than actually being inside of something. Also, there was an unfortunate choice to give the caves a bit of a blue glow, although it might make sense, as it was where the blue elves lived. That uniform color scheme was another example of cinematography working against the stereo image. There wasn't a lot of contrast, and there was a tendency for things just to blend together. At one point, there's a great deer head shot that reminded me of a similarly fun moment from, of all things, Night of the Living Dead. Another great moment, however, I fear that it did demonstrate how much more they could have done overall with the stereo. This takes a backed-off approach to displaying 3D, and aside from that deer shot, really doesn't play around or go out of its way to create any stereo-centric moments. There were times when I wish they would have opened up the stereo field even just a bit more, or gave us a tad more variety and convergence for the closer shots. To be fair, this was typical for the time, 2011. Possibly they were nervous about audience rejection of the then new 3D format. From what I read, this was the first Norwegian 3D movie, so maybe it's a situation similar to what happened with the first Spider-Man. They played it painfully safe. The camera team does deserve some compliments with the stereo film, however. It is difficult to find a frame that has inconsistencies between the eyes. The focus and color levels are only ever different in the most minute ways. At a certain point, I found myself unsure if this was natively shot or a 3D conversion. There was virtually no twist to any convergence. This does create a comfortable 3D experience that shouldn't offend any viewer. It is enjoyable, but has an overall cardboard feel. Shots felt similar to a Viewmaster reel with visible layers but no detail in the objects themselves, which is sometimes kind of neat to see, especially in crowded shots where you can see different groups of people hanging out in the background. You also get some gentle scenes of looking down through some metal grid work, which isn't too bad. Story-wise, the elves take on what is probably an allegory to climate change as represented by a magical weather-controlling horn, though I don't think they thought it through, as it could also be implying that the whole thing is a big corporate fraud. So, by perhaps accident, it's a film for every perspective. Ultimately, it's a kids' movie that's not intended for deep thinking and follows a trend I've noticed in kids' movies where anyone with a job is evil. I guess people are supposed to keep warm by magic.
Så ser du rolig og vennlig på alle og spør hvorfor finnes vi blå? Dronning Fjellrose har reddet blåhornet fra husfolket. La meg sette på deg, dronning.